I can't underscore enough. There will be no amnesty. The mass deportations continue, but in a strategic way, and we move the workforce towards automation and 100% American participation, which again, with 34 million people, able-bodied adults on Medicaid, we should be able to do that fairly quickly.
Yes, thank you. That was Brooke Rollins, United States Secretary of Agriculture, saying that we're all going to get replaced by robots and die of benevolent neglect on governmental subsistence that doesn't exist. So that's fun. Today we're going to be talking about ICE and its connection, name melding with Israeli intelligence. As you know, the Israeli plan for Gaza is to put some 600,000 Palestinians in a concentration camp built over the ruins of Rafah, a city that had stood for millennia as a staging area for, quote, voluntary migration. It seems like we're doing our own test run of that in the Florida Everglades with this alligator Alcatraz. Governments learn from each other, y'all, and empower and reciprocate their respective bad behaviors and worst practices. Today's episode is DHS, Tiger Teams to concentration camps, ICE and its connection to Israeli intelligence. Hello and welcome to State of Play on MintPress News, a bi-weekly geopolitical news show and now a podcast. Yes, we are now on audio streaming platforms. If you don't want to deal with YouTube ads or video, that's an option. We don't have any reviews yet because we just launched. So if you could help us out, that would be great by heading over to your favorite platform and leaving a review. We're also on Patreon if you're picking up what we're putting down. Okay, plug over. So the format for this show is going forward will be a Monday episode where I break down the insanity from the weekend by ranting into a computer camera, and a Thursday episode where we will bring on journalists from the MintPress newsroom and other guests to discuss the news, but in a more evergreen manner. ICE and Israeli intelligence go way back, so this is like a quasi-evergreen episode that you can always come back and reference. So to get straight into it, today, lots to talk about, and to that end, we are joined by Robert Inlakesh. Robert is a political analyst, journalist, and documentary filmmaker who has reported from and lived in the occupied Palestinian territories and has worked with RT, Cuds News, TRT, Al Mayadeen English, and is currently here at MintPress. And Jalyssa Dugrot, an independent journalist based in Florida. She covers Middle East conflicts and explores the influence of Western governments and media on these conflicts in the region. She has recently been on the ground reporting on the anti-ICE actions in LA for MintPress News over the past couple weeks, months. Thanks so much for coming on, y'all.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
All right. So, well, here we are. We've seen kind of this expansion of cooperation between ICE, law enforcement in general, the NYPD, LAPD, even the Atlanta PD have liaison programs in Tel Aviv with the IDF. And people are thinking it's kind of like a new thing. But when I was doing research for this episode, like it goes way back, almost to the inception of ICE and the foundation of the Department of Homeland Security, dating back to the Patriot Act.
Yeah, well, to comment on that, this has been happening for years. The New York Police Department was receiving training from the IDF as well. It also goes all the way through to private security companies as well that have been operating. Not only do the Israelis, bring their ex-Mossad agents, ex-Unit 8200, which is Israeli military intelligence, officers over to open up these security firms and tech firms. Also, there's direct state complicity, state-to-state complicity with this, and they're sharing tactics, sharing intelligence. So this is something that's been going on for a very long time. And of course, you look at a lot of the techniques that they've been using against the Palestinians. This goes not just to policing or databases, but also certain equipment that is being used by the Israeli military, tactics of crowd control. In the occupied West Bank, you'll see that they're experimenting with certain technology, which the likes of Google are involved in terms of predictive capabilities and how to decide via facial recognition whether someone is about to imminently commit an attack or is going to be violent. These are the same technologies they're testing on Palestinians, and then, of course, they then market this to the world. So it is a testing ground, really, that we see in the occupied territories.
Yeah, and Jalyssa, when you were in LA covering the ICE protests, we've been seeing videos of ICE officers like take out their phone, and we presume they're like planting it, like plugging it into a AI app. Did you guys hear about that from local activists?
We didn't hear about an AI app, but I mean, there are definitely suspicions with people on the ground. I mean, I was with my colleague, Steve. He's an independent photographer. And I mean, we were walking right in front of LAPD and he was just like recording, like zooming in on us. And, you know, I was like, Steve, put your mask on if you don't want whatever comes after this, you know, to be documented, like just as far as like his face in that these facial recognition programs that we're, you know, seeing more about, you know, in the news. But we definitely saw so many LAPD officers recording with their phones, and it's not their personal phone. I want to say it's an issued phone because they all look the same. All of them are like these black with like these like black iPhones with like these military, you know, grade cases, and they're real.
Oh yeah, they all have the same cases, so they're definitely issued.
For sure.
Yeah. So we're going to get into all this and talk about the history and stuff. But unfortunately for y'all, I have to do a monologue because I'm told that every episode needs to have like a primer that we can cut from it. So I'm going to yap at you for like 4 minutes to kind of go through a brief history for the layman about how all this works. And then we're going to just dive into it. So apologies. It will not be as bad as Hakeem Jeffries yapping in front of the Senate for 9 hours. With his baseball bat picture, you know, which was giving like big divorced dad energy. So let's strap in, y'all. So, 1 second. So y'all may be tracking the slightly breaking story that the Department of Homeland Security put together a Tiger Team to scrutinize student protesters earlier this year. A Tiger Team is technically a temporary group of experts to rapidly address a critical problem or opportunity within an organization. They are typically cross-functional, bringing together specialists from different areas to leverage diverse perspectives and expertise. This approach, in theory, allows for faster decision-making and innovative solutions compared to traditional siloed teams. So apparently, most of what this band of experts, this Tiger Team, did was investigate 500 names highlighted by the Canary Mission, a secretive but clearly non-academic political organization that uses its website to engage in defamatory attacks against college students who advocate for Palestinian rights and against faculty who teach or speak publicly about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And yesterday, the First Night Amendment Institute at Columbia University issued a press statement yesterday that yes, this Tiger Team was told to investigate lists by the Canary Mission. So a senior immigrations official testified that the agency assembled a team in early 2025 to investigate student program testers. This team, referred to internally as the Tiger Team, rapidly compiled over 100 reports based on a list of 5,000 people. The official, Peter Hatch, helps lead an office within ICE's Homeland Security Investigations Division that compiles background reports on targets of the agency's investigations. He was questioned by Alexandria Colon of Share Tremonte LLP. Tomorrow's expected witness, which is today, is Peter Hatch, a DHS official who is the assistant director of the Office of Intelligence and Homeland Security, and Amy Greer, a lawyer for Mahmoud Khalil, who was targeted through this Tiger Team program, along with other activists in the university space. But the connection between ICE and pro-Israel nonprofits goes way back to its foundation. But I wanted to highlight one article by deadlyexchange.org, pulling that up real quick, entitled, it was from 2018, it was entitled, Deputy Director of ICE was sent by the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, for training with the Israeli military. And it asked the fundamental question: why does the ADL, an anti-free speech Zionist nonprofit here in America, protect Trump's family separation policies while also sending ICE officers for training in Israel? Well, of course, Jewish Voice for Peace had determined that 3 years ago, this as of 2018, Peter Edge, who was promoted to acting deputy director of ICE under President Trump, attended a training in Israel as part of the quote, ADL's 2015 National Counterterrorism Institute seminar. Offered under the guise of counterterrorism, the real-world results of these trips have been Israel and U.S. officials sharing, quote, worst practices, deportation and detention, shoot-to-kill policies, massive spying and surveillance that are also the go-to policies of agencies like ICE. But in today's episode, we want to address the spying and surveillance exchange. On October 1st, 2024, Wire magazine published an article, ICE signs $2 million contract with spyware maker Paragon Solutions. And while the contract may seem small in U.S. governmental defense spending, the one-year contract between the company's U.S. subsidiary in Virginia and ICE's Homeland Security Investigations Division was signed on September 27th of last year and covers a, quote, fully configured proprietary solution, including license, hardware, warranty, maintenance, and training. Yes, paying for software licenses to the company notorious for, quote, hacking WhatsApp and Signal, which is Paragon Solutions. And Paragon's product will also likely get spyware critics and surveillance experts alike rubbernecking. It claims to give police the power to remotely break into encrypted instant messaging communications, whether that's WhatsApp, Signal, Facebook Messenger, Gmail, Instagram. The industry sources have said to Wired Magazine. One spyware exec said it also promises to get a longer lasting access to advice, even when it's rebooted. But the main thing here is to look at Paragon's founders. Ehud Barak, former Israeli prime minister and co-founder. Ehud Chernosin, former commander of Unit 8200 and co-founder. Idan Nurik, co-founder also with Unit 8200. Igor Bogudlov, also Unit 8200. Liad Avraham, also Unit 8200. Those are all the founders of this unit that's now contracting with ICE and giving them software. So Unit 8200 being a prominent intelligence unit within the Israeli Intelligence Corps, which is part of the IDF, often compared to the United States National Security Agency. It's considered by some to be among the foremost technical intelligence agencies globally. And once you're in it and go into the tech sector, you never leave it. All of these programs they license to U.S. federal agencies are rife with exploitable backdoors, so Israeli intelligence can most likely get access to whatever ICE has, NYPD has, etc., at least with regards to data collected by their specific software. But this is only one instance in one company. One last example before I shut up is Zen City, like Zen City. It's meant to keep your city zen and the population zenned out and not engaging with anything. And it's an Israeli data analysis firm serving agencies across the U.S. Zen City markets itself as a less invasive alternative to some social, media monitoring tools, as it primarily provides aggregate data and explicitly prohibits targeted surveillances of protests. Sure. Cities like Phoenix, New Orleans, Pittsburgh have stated they use Zen City to analyze public sentiment and combat misinformation, anti-government information. So let's just, as an easy open source exercise, let's go to the LinkedIn of co-founder Eyal Feder Levy. And if we pull up his stuff, here we go. Urban Innovation Geek, CEO at Zen City. Let's just scroll down to education and skills, recommendations, publications, and courses. IDF officer course associated with Israeli Defense Forces, and intelligence officers advanced training associated with Israeli Defense Forces. So if you literally go through all of these Israel-American defense contractors, it's literally the same story. They're all part of these same organizations, and they're actively working with our intelligence service and law enforcement services, which are supposed to be completely domestic, but of course they're connected to this foreign entity. So any commentary you guys want to give on that would be appreciated.
Well, we've known for a really long time that, there was a collaboration between LAPD, NYPD, just, domestic forces in general being trained by the IDF, because we know that for several years, the NYPD was trained by Israeli forces. And then it came out that they had run like a demographics unit, which used like predatory, racist, and a violation of personal security methods to target Muslims and people that they thought were suspicious in general, in return for learning how to, like a data collection method. I read a data collection method for them to use. And so then we've also seen the trend continues where we have technology that's actively being used and tested on the Palestinians in Gaza. And then in turn, we develop this, we ramp it up, and then we bring it back to the United States. And so I think it's this trend of collaboration. And it just perpetuates this really, this really damaging cycle, and it's eroding the trust, in America, of Americans in the United States with, the United States government in general. But of course, this isn't a surprise to anybody. But it's really interesting just how ingrained we are and enmeshed with a foreign military that has nothing to do with the United States, and that this has become so normalized.
Right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to add to that it has been happening for a very long time, but specifically what we are seeing here, I mean, it's all laid out for us in a document published on October 7, 2024, Project Esther, which was published by the Heritage Foundation, the most influential think tank over the Trump administration. Everything from the anti-Semitism, so-called anti-Semitism task force, which just goes after anti-Israel activists or people critical of Israel, to the deportations, the attacks on freedom of speech in college campuses, all of these bills that you see being put through for today. The Trump administration, since day one, has been enacting this strategy, which was set forth last year. So it was sitting there. They'd obviously worked on this over time. And this is something that now we are seeing implemented. And the Trump administration was funded, the campaign was funded by a who's who of Zionist billionaires, essentially, including, of course, Miriam Adelson, Israel's richest billionaire. And her, according to Haaretz newspaper, one of Israel's top newspapers, not the most read, but one of the most trusted that they have, the quid pro quo was that he would receive $100 million in financing for his campaign so that he would allow the annexation of the West Bank. And basically everything Israel wants at this point, the Trump administration is doing for them. They're not holding back. And I would encourage everyone to look at this document because it's I think that everything you need to know about what's happening right now is in this document. If you want,
it's absolutely true. And let's just take a quick look at it for the audience now. So we know what the Heritage Foundation is. It's probably the most influential right-wing think tank and policy crafter aligned with the Trump administration. We know that Tom Homan, the former border czar under Obama, and my favorite hire of Obama, is now a massive figure within the Heritage Foundation, as well as like Stephen Miller, the brains behind the messaging of the Trump administration, the policy of Trump administration. So Project Esther, a national strategy to combat anti-Semitism. I'm just going to give a couple takeaways because they're trying to globalize the fight against any sort of dissent. So starting with the summary, America's virulently anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and anti-American, putting it all in one thing, pro-Palestinian movement, is part of a global Hamas support network, HSN, that is trying to compel the U.S. government to abandon its longstanding support for Israel. Blah, blah, blah. Key takeaways. America's virulently anti-Israel Zionist and anti-America is part of the global Hamas support network. But here's where it gets really funny. Supported by activists and funders dedicated to destroying capitalism and democracy, the Hamas support network benefits from the support and training of America's overseas enemy. Basically, if you really get into this, it's trying to conflate like all these different things, like anti-Israel sentiment, border policy and immigration policy, and like anti-communist, anti-socialist policy as well. It's crazy. They've all meshed it into one.
And the dangerous thing here is as well that they can just put out an allegation like they did against Mahmoud Khalil and associate that person with Hamas or whatever other organization, because of course they will expand this. It's not just going to be Hamas. They will carry this on and target others too, perhaps not even involved in the pro-Palestinian movement. they can just make the accusation and then there you go, you can deport somebody. And we've seen that they are prioritizing, deporting people who are specifically under their definition, anti-Semitic or publishing or motivated by anti-Semitism. The head of this anti-Semitism task force essentially came out and said that they want to stop people with anti-Semitic mindsets from entering the United States, whatever that means. It's all very vague language. They are tying a million things together. So you've tied somebody who's a so-called Islamic extremist with somebody who is a socialist or a communist. It's basically a broad brush of everything that they don't like. And then the accusation comes and it's sort of like shoot first, ask questions later. And that's the dangerous precedent that's been set here. And as we saw, that this is the language of the Heritage Foundation, but now it's also the language of all the other think tanks as well. If you look at the way that they're talking about this, or they have been speaking about this since earlier in 2024, they are painting a broad brush because they don't have an argument. And when you've lost the argument and you don't actually have any evidence to present, you end up just having to make these very general statements to smear people. And you spoke about the Canary Mission a moment ago. When they put out their brief on Mahmoud Khalil, they said that he's associated with Hamas or he's supported Hamas. And the one thing that they could find of him supposedly supporting Hamas was there was a video of him in a protest where someone was chanting from the river to the sea. And they said, this is something that Khalid Mash'al, one of the former leaders of Hamas, had infamously said, and it means to push the Jews into the sea. And that was their connection that they were trying to make between him and Hamas. Nothing else. They couldn't find anything else. I looked through it. I thought, okay, maybe, he's going to have something a little bit incriminating on him that they're going to weaponize and use. There's literally nothing. And they wrote this big, long brief trying to point out something, but they couldn't find a connection. So it's just, well, this phrase was said by this guy and he's Hamas, so therefore everyone's Hamas. And another dangerous thing is they're actually trying, and this is something that a few of my sources have told me, that they're trying to now lure certain people into the United States that they weren't allowing to come into the US before, so they can specifically arrest them. So it's a very dangerous precedent that has been set, and they continue to push with this. And it's not just, Canary Mission. It's these ultra-Zionist, Kahanist organizations as well, which are pushing this, very violent organizations, which are pushing this propaganda as well, and working with the Trump administration openly.
Yeah.
I completely agree with you, and especially when it comes to the Canary Mission, because allowing vague practices basically enables them to just generalize, to sweep us all up in the masses. And so if you can kind of defend this on the basis that you can take that 1% of evidence, like you said, declare that you feel unsafe, then it makes it entirely easier, to further your point. So, I mean, the Canary Mission, I agree with you, is just so controversial because it's like this anonymous website that's used to blacklist people. And essentially, the United States government is supposed to vet information independently. We're not supposed to launder it from these anonymous blacklist organizations that make up rules for us. And I think essentially what that allows the United States government to do is push off responsibility from this. We let the other side make the rules for us, and then we have to obey them, which is an erosion of democracy, is an erosion of trust, like I said, in the United States. And so these problems just layer on top of each other.
Yeah, and it's gonna, the interesting thing for me with a background in counterterrorism was there was kind of like a reason we never, at least when I was in the logic behind it was, when we were preparing for counter cartel operations or training for them. I was asking why weren't, when I was in my early 20s, why aren't these considered Mexican cartels or South American cartels considered terrorist organizations? Because they objectively perform acts of terror. They kill government officials and people, civilians, in order to affect a political goal that kind of fits in with the at least the U.S. definition of terrorism. But there's a lot of other consequences when you designate terrorist organizations within like one of your biggest trading partners, and then it opens it up for like drone strikes within there. But like we're trying to see a conflation between, these criminal migrants and pro-Palestine protesters all get lumped under the same terrorist narrative, because MS-13 and Trend Awagwa are now foreign terrorist organizations. We're supporting the Hamas global terrorist network as well, and it all comes down to this. This was from a couple days ago, and it regards to national security threat and the denial of birthright citizenship. Democracy Now! From a couple days ago. Wait, where is it? Here we go.
Justice Department is now aggressively prioritizing efforts to strip naturalized U.S. citizens of their citizenship. NPR's Jacqueline Diaz reports the DOJ is focused on
Oh, my bad, NPR.
cases where naturalized American citizens commit certain crimes.
The new stance towards naturalized citizens who commit crimes is laid out in a memo from the Justice Department to its Civil Division employees. Those crimes could include anything from national security incidents to cases of fraud, according to the memo. According to 2023 data, 25 million immigrants are naturalized U.S. citizens. Denaturalization has existed for decades and was used widely to deport citizens accused of being communists during the 1950s. Some immigration attorneys have expressed concerns over this expanded denaturalization effort, questioning whether it is constitutional and how the families of naturalized citizens would be impacted.
Yeah, and I do think that's apt. We are entering a new age of McCarthyism, except it's expanding beyond communism to anything that challenges national security, which is a completely nebulous term, which eventually, if we play this out and go down the pipeline to the worst case scenario, challenging national security means you're an enemy of the state and everyone goes to the gulag.
Well, as well, like the thing when we're looking at this, it mentioned going back to the 1950s, but if you look at specifically this doctrine that the United States and the collective West adopted during the Cold War, and really with Henry Kissinger leading the charge, with we don't negotiate with terrorists and, all these terrorist designations and labels. Of course, they interlink the two issues of, well, we don't want the PLO, for instance, which has just risen up and is taking hold in the Middle East and the Arab world, to somehow replicate what we see in Vietnam. And so what they did essentially by introducing these terrorist designations and labeling everybody a terrorist or a terrorist organization is essentially that you shut down discussions with those groups. But also what you do is you collectively punish a population, which we see carrying on today. For instance, with the designation of Ansar Allah in Yemen as a terrorist organization, you'll notice that the Biden administration, when they put them back on one of their terrorist lists and designated them a terrorist organization, they gave them a lesser designation because, of course, you're still calling them terrorists, but you're not going to block, for instance, humanitarian aid organizations from working in Sana'a, and because they're going to have to deal with Ansar Allah, which is the government there. Which operates a government over the vast majority of the Yemeni population. But then when Trump came in, he issued a harsher terrorist designation, which now collectively punishes the people in Yemen because humanitarian aid organizations, the UN, it's difficult to go and do their work because they can easily get sanctions slapped on them. They can be accused of collaborating with a terrorist organization. So it makes things very, very difficult. And it also stifles political movements and progress as well. In the case of Palestine, where it's been weaponized perhaps in the most pernicious way, especially recently, every single Palestinian political party is a terrorist organization in the United States, essentially. The only exception they give is to the mainstream branch of Fatah, which runs the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. But Hamas is a terrorist organization. Palestinian Islamic Jihad is a terrorist organization. There are, of course, Islamic groups, but then you have nationalist groups that are prescribed as terrorist organizations. You have the likes of the PFLP and the DFLP, which are Marxist groups. They're also terrorist organizations. And then when you have the elections that took place back in 2006 and Hamas won in a landslide, the United States and the UK and the EU, the UK was part of the EU back then, all instantly applied sanctions because, again, we don't talk to terrorists, and terrorists have just won the election. So it doesn't matter that it's a free and fair election. We're against them because they're terrorists. And like you said, you could apply a terrorist label to basically anybody you want, any organization, any person that commits a violent crime. You could, in theory, call them a terrorist, because what is the actual definition of terrorism? Really, terrorism is people in the Middle East doing things that we don't like. That's what terrorism is. There's no context behind it. And that's why you can rope in an organization like Hezbollah in southern Lebanon and a group like Al-Qaeda or Daesh, and they're the same thing under this designation. And now in the UK as well, because it's such a politicized term, and its application is so broad, Palestine Action is now a terrorist organization for spraying red paint on weapons manufacturers' buildings or factories. So this designation, these designations, the descriptions of what they call terrorists and terrorism is something that has long been weaponized. It does come from back in during the days of the Cold War. And it is linked between, now their enemy are Muslims and Islamic resistance groups in the Middle East. But, you know, there was a large period of the history here where the main enemy were socialist groups and communists. And so they see this as a shared struggle because both groups and movements have learned from each other and have taken things from each other. Ultimately, what these movements, which they call terrorist organizations, often in such circumstances, are groups which are resisting tyranny, occupation, imperialism, and they want to have independence and sovereignty. And so, again, it's just a weaponization of this term. I think it's a ridiculous term to apply politically, especially now as in Syria you have Ahmed al-Shara, formerly Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who was a commander of Daesh, and he was wanted by the US. He was a terrorist, and now he's the West's best friend. He's a guy with a tough past.
Yeah, he wasn't just wanted by the U.S. He was actually detained by U.S. forces for a while and then released. Whoops. And of course, I saw Jalyssa's commentary on how, at the same time, Francesca Albanese, the UN Special Rapporteur for Palestine, is getting hit with. She's getting hit with sanctions now for supporting terrorism. She's
getting slapped with sanctions, as well as the chief prosecutor of the ICC, who was also hit with sanctions in May. And it's because they're scared. And I was actually recording a video on it before. They're scared. And I see a lot of people say, like, well, Israel isn't a signatory of the Rome Statute. Palestine is. And technically they can go into Palestine and investigate crimes committed and perpetrated by Israel. And then also that links to the United States because we aid and abet financially and materially the genocide in Gaza. So it's all tied in. They are scared. Like, this isn't just like a big power move, like it's no big deal. If you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. They have everything to fear, and it's accountability. Robert, to piggyback off of you, I completely agree. And I said this in another show a couple of weeks ago, that if the United States can, paint the Middle East as a hotbed of extremism, it pretty much justifies Western intervention or creating these rules defining what terrorism is, slapping it and propagandizing it to the entire world so that everybody buys our narrative. And then it's just this really vicious cycle. And so, yeah, I would completely agree with you.
Yeah. And I do like the point that they are scared because they're scared. That's why they wear the masks. That's why DHS, Department of Homeland Security, whines on Twitter every day, posting stuff like this. All right. We're seeing burning ICE vehicles, burning American flags. Sounds like a fun punk show after party. And they say restore law and order now. ICE tip line. If you keep scrolling down, they basically are whining that people are calling heroic ICE officers the Gestapo. And yeah, they're clearly very terrified because, there aren't enough of them. So when we look at like these predictive policing models by like Palantir, that's also, of course, has developed AI targeting algorithms based off of where's daddy functions in Gaza. And they're also being notoriously controversial for their predictive policing algorithms that are used in like New Orleans and stuff. Like the reason that the national database plan is going ahead is because these predictive policing models with all your information and stuff and all your like bank accounts, so they can collate the data and see like where the low income areas are, like where the what is the financial distribution of like displaced climate refugees. Are they going to be like more prone to like dissent because they have nothing left? Do we need to allocate more police officers to that demographic in that region, so on and so forth? And what it is, it's a force multiplier. Like mobility in warfare is a force multiplier, being able to like move really fast and do 2 operations a night instead of just 1. It basically increases the presence on the ground of soldiers or law enforcement officers without actually having more of them, because there aren't enough. Like people are freaking out. All these reactionary liberals being like, you should have voted for Harris because now there's going to be 100,000 new ICE officers. It's like, from where? Where are they coming from? Like a lot of these plans that they have in place just aren't achievable. Like they are getting rolled up and completely losing a low-grade counterinsurgency in LA, and that's just one city. So, I mean, they are scared and they're deceptively weak, and there is a lot to freak out about, obviously. So I wanted to move to like detention facilities. I wanted to talk about Alligator Alcatraz here, and then move to the Gaza immigration plan, because again, governments learn from each other and they're both connected. Now, I will say that the U.S. carceral system is, of course, very different from the Israeli one. The Israeli one, way worse in some ways. Obviously, they don't have like the same detention standards. We are trying to actively roll back our detention standards. But the Israeli Supreme Court in 2009 ruled that they can't have for-profit prisons. Our prisons are absolutely for-profit. In 2005, all illegal immigrant arrests or detentions were held, 25% were held in for-profit prisons. And Obama expanded that, Trump expanded that, Biden expanded that to 90% in the last administration. And now we're seeing Alligator Alcatraz. And so you're actually there in Florida. I assume that you're exposed to more like local news than we are on a national scale. Could you tell us like the status of what's going on over there?
Right now, we're not hearing a ton of like what's coming in, what's going out. I did hear some recordings that the conditions there are not great. Alligator Alcatraz was also constructed in 8 days. And so people have a lot of concerns about this in general. Like we're talking Florida experiences like several hurricanes a year at the category of 3 or 4. And I was reading that Alligator Alcatraz is only able to withstand a category 2. So I'm thinking also from security reasons, they don't really care about the inmates at all, considering let's look at Hurricane Katrina, when the prisoners were detained and kept in, or, forgotten and neglected and left inside of the prison, during Hurricane Katrina. What's going to happen this time? And especially the way that the United States government speaks about, those that will be detained inside of Alligator Alcatraz. It's a threat. And I do think that the goal is that they're either deported or they die. I mean, if we heard Caroline Leavitt, I don't know if you guys heard her press conference briefing. She was like, and what it's surrounded by is dangerous wildlife and swamp waters. So you can try escaping, but, like something bad is going to happen. It's a really gross display of power. And I mean, what Alligator Alcatraz, I feel like, is the step right before sending migrants to El Salvador, is kind of what I feel like they're constructing here.
Well, when Bukele, the El Salvadorian world's coolest dictator, came to Washington, Trump said, you're going to need to build like 10 more CCOTs for all the people we're going to send you. I was like, probably going to have a CCOT here. And that's kind of what we're seeing. And with Alligator Alcatraz, its budget is now ballooning up to $600 million, apparently. And is it true it was used for FEMA funds? Because I find that really ironic, because under the Obama administration, all these like right-wing conspiracy theorists were like, Obama's going to put us into FEMA detention centers and stuff, right? Wasn't that
I did read that actually, and especially kind of coinciding with the timeline of what's going on now in Texas. I know you're there with the flash floods. Like they're like, there goes our FEMA money going to Alligator Alcatraz in Florida. I did read that though.
Yeah. So anyways, we have this ghastly expression of like state concentration camps and centers. Obviously, you know, we've had this problem during Katrina where just inmates were left to die during natural disasters. I can definitely see that happening this hurricane season. But I just wanted to move over to our other little fun government in Israel. They have another immigration policy, Robert, that they're going to try to affect in Gaza. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, obviously, they've got a number of different schemes that they're trying to put into play with ethnically cleansing the population of the Gaza Strip. So far, and this is just my opinion, I don't think they're going to prove successful because we can talk about all of the logistics of what they can do inside the Gaza Strip. They've consistently attempted to move different portions of the population into areas, whether it would be the Mawasi area, which was a small area to begin with, and then it expanded. And now Mawasi is a whole big tent city area, which they refer to, or all the way south to Rafah at the beginning. They have not proven capable of forcing the people out, and they can't win militarily on the ground either. And the big problem for them really with achieving these goals, which they set them forth all the time, there's a new one, Israel Katz, the Israeli defense minister, had just put forth, claiming that, you know, there's going to be this big scheme. They've set up this brand new corridor in the south, and they want to intersect the Gaza Strip into smaller and smaller pieces of territory. And now what they're doing also with that, they've built essentially what could be called a concentration camp in the west of Rafah. But to the east of Rafah, they also have this militant group, which now calls itself the Popular Forces, I believe, who are they're essentially a gang which was set up by the Israelis. They number, I believe, around 500 now, who are led by criminals, drug traffickers, people who were hardline Salafists, formerly affiliated with, the alphabet soup of militant organizations affiliated with Al-Qaeda, which Hamas has long been fighting, and also some with links to Daesh, like Yasser Abu Shabab, who currently heads the organization. And essentially what they're doing, after having looted aid, then brought it to these warehouses under Israeli supervision, essentially, and protection, flooding it onto the black market, driving up prices and making a profit out of it. They've now styled themselves as a resistance force. They're also working on securing the aid transfers of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which has multiple aid sites in the south, in the Rafah area and Khan Yunis, around there. And so this ISIS-linked gang, essentially, which was looting aid before and is backed by the Israeli government, it's armed by them. You'll see them wearing tactical vests supplied by the Israeli military. They're under Israeli protection, and now they're being used to even fight Hamas and do some missions on the ground, which they've failed dramatically in and got their heads literally blown off in some instances. They're working with this Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, which Trump just put $30 million into, which is clearly an Israeli project. So this is something that they're working on. But again, if you're going to look at all of this, and there's a lot of schemes, there are so many plans. They've talked about settlements. They've talked about the different ways to do the ethnic cleansing. Ultimately, it boils down to, will Egypt allow the Palestinian population to be forced across the border? And then you have to ask yourself the question, what happens to Egypt? And where else are they going to go? Are they going to go to Jordan? Because these are the obvious options. What are 1.8 million, they say now, that's supposed to be the population from 2.3 million before. what are those people who've lost multiple family members? They've lost their brothers, their sisters, their mothers, their fathers, their children, etc. What are these people who have been highly traumatized going to do when they arrive in Egypt, or going to do when they arrive in Jordan? Are they going to shut up and just pretend like they weren't just ethnically cleansed? Are they going to stop being part of political movements? Are they going to pretend as if nothing just happened to them and that there wasn't a genocide committed against their people? No, of course not. They're going to continue to struggle for their homeland. And this is something the Egyptians and the Jordanians know very well. And they don't want this, because they know if they do have the Palestinian population from Gaza forced into their countries, then what's going to happen is there is going to be resistance movements which eventually rise in both areas. The people will not stop resisting. And especially in Jordan, this is a terrible situation for the Israelis, because essentially that whole entire population in Jordan is Palestinian. Mm-hmm. And so if a resistance forms inside Jordan that goes out of control of what the Jordanian regime can manage, this shares the largest land border with occupied Palestine and will represent the catastrophe. The Israelis surely, despite all of their propaganda and the theater they put on for their crazy domestic population, comprised of psychopaths who want to see ethnic cleansing and the mass murder of Palestinians, per all of the polls. This is not my opinion. And there's no other way to describe them than psychopaths at this point. When you say that you want to exterminate everybody in a city that you conquer, the vast preponderance of the Israeli population say that. Like they put on this theater for them, and they talk about the settlements, and they draw up these drafts. But they did the same thing in South Lebanon. When they were invading South Lebanon, all these settler organizations had these big meetings in Tel Aviv, and they put together all of these graphics, and they said, "Oh, we're going to put our settlements, in southern Lebanon." They're never going to put settlements in southern Lebanon. They won't. I think it's like 7% have returned back to areas like Kiryat Shimona along the Lebanese border area. So I don't think these plans are feasible. But it speaks to the depravity of the Israeli leadership and also the people that get on board with this as well, that they want to do this.
Yeah, and I'm just looking at parallels too. We can see the depravity of like the Israeli population, at least like the 82% of them that support this. It's probably higher, especially in the IDF. But you also have people on, across the pond over here in America, like Laura Loomer saying, that there are 65 million meals for alligators now. And that's the entire Hispanic population of the United States. And of course, people really like that. Of course, it's not as homogenous here as it is in Israel. But what I find interesting about these two situations, the mass deportations here and the push for voluntary migrations in Palestine, is both like two colonial powers basically implementing very similar operational plans, strategic plans that won't work, because we have our own problem. Like it's less of a problem for us about like where to put them, but there's just too many of them if you want to like mass deport everybody. Like Jalyssa, you were just in LA with ICE, and of course they're targeting ICE as the democratic bastion sanctuary city and the cultural capital of like Hispanic immigrant America. How effective were they?
Not super effective at all. Most of the time, and this is why they resort to really, I think they understand this, and this is why they resort to really aggressive tactics like right off the bat, because essentially the pattern that we see is that these protesters peacefully assemble. And I can say that I've been there now a cumulative 2 weeks. Okay. Right after that Saturday or that Friday where we saw the Waymo cars on fire and things like that, a cumulative 2 weeks spent in there. And I mean, going to like West Hollywood, East Hollywood, the North and South, Los Angeles, in and out, is these protesters peacefully assemble. And then immediately after, it's declared unlawful. And then they just start shooting. And then they start throwing gas. And then they put their gas masks. And then they lunge at you. And then they run. And then they retreat. And so like they're constantly using these tactics because they realize, I think because they're not successful. And so they're immediately going from 0 to 100. And even then, they last from like 8 a.m. until like midnight. I mean, these protesters will just keep going and keep going. And even then, we've seen the presence of LAPD as well as the United States Marine Corps die down. Actually, that's what I saw this time around, which would have been my second week. I was there last Monday to Saturday, is the presence has actually died down. And I spoke to some police officers on 4th of July, and I spoke with them and I said, do you expect a presence much like we did on No Kings? Like, what are you guys expecting for 4th of July, for this patriotic holiday in a state that is actively opposing everything patriotic, that this government stands for, and the United States as it stands? And they told me, we're not prepared for that. We actually weren't really briefed on that, and we don't really know. And I asked multiple. One of them told me, yeah, that we're kind of, when we see protesters come with helmets and glasses, like, we're kind of expecting something bad. But I asked multiple, and they told me, we don't really know. We're not prepared. A lot of them went home, and this is what we're being told. So I don't think it's successful at all. And they're definitely going to keep persisting, which, again, when we talked about terrorism or, anarchists, you have to label people this way so that you can hit a wall. You have to hit a wall, because if you go beyond that wall, you have to rationalize and try to understand. And they don't want to do that. And so I think it's easier to classify these people as, these like liberal immigrant Hamas sympathizers, because it makes it easier for LAPD to rationalize this, that they're like fighting, domestic anarchists and terrorists.
Right. They have these exchange programs where they go over there and, trade worst practices with Shin Bet and the IDF forces and stuff like that. I don't know. Do you see that playing in to their tactics on the ground?
Yeah. I mean, besides it being written and documented that we send them, it's a very transactional relationship, and there's always a trade-off with it. I mean, definitely in the idea of the generalization, they don't really care to know who you are. So let's take Palestine, right? Palestinian children, they're just getting food. One sneezes, it's like, oh, trigger happy, we're just going to shoot all of them, like in a row. Obviously, that's not happening quite literally in the United States, but it's like you make a sudden movement, you carry a flag, you're getting shot. It doesn't matter. And so it's like this trigger happy, generalizing of the public that allows them to apply these like mass punishments. This is enabled through their surveillance, though, facial recognition and things like that. And so even if they don't have a plausible reason or any legitimate reason to detain, to shoot, to do any of that, they just do it anyways, because the idea isn't to really think, it's just to do. And so you find these very immediate reactions. And I think that those run alongside each other very well.
Yeah. And they're also very scared. Just like the Israeli Defense Forces are also very scared as well. My like final thing I wanted to kind of like ruminate on, and Robert, I'd like your take on this. Do you see the security relationship between the U.S. and Israel dying down anytime in the future?
I don't, unless the Israeli regime collapses or becomes severely weakened, but because they're just so deeply embedded. Even if you look at and you take the ideology of these groups, for instance, the Israelis, who are, so incredibly violent, and they crack down on their opposition, whether they be Palestinian resistance groups or people on college campuses, with an iron fist. They like to cancel people. They want to destroy their lives. They will come after them with a vengeance. Are the same people that have this victim complex where they want to claim that they're the victims of Palestinians, they're the victims of canceling, they're the victims of this and that. And you see the same thing in the United States with these white supremacist types, these white nationalist types, or even just people who are like these ultra nationalists who are in the Trump camp. White people are the target, and they are the victims, the ultimate victims. And they like to talk about how the other side cries victim, but there's one side with the power. There are people that go online and cancel people because of tweets, mean tweets, and try and, call a lot of things racist, which people want to dispute and all of this. But then you look on the other side, on the left side of the spectrum, some people, they might take it a little bit too far, and they might try to destroy somebody's life or their career or something like that. For sure, we see a lot of that, right? Or we saw a lot of that before I'd say it died down. So some of that happened. They had some cases to point to on the right. And so they said, well, we're all against that. We want to stop that. We're against canceling, right? We don't like people claiming to be the victim. But then if you look at them, their politics is all identity politics. There's no substance to anything they're saying because it's all white identity politics or white Jewish identity politics. So it's like, well, we have this ethno state that we protect, unquestioning. We don't question, anything about it whatsoever. Anybody that says anything about it is an anti-Semite. Anybody that questions Trump's policies, you must be in on destroying the white race and getting rid of America and changing America and destroying it. We see the same exact ideology from British nationalists and French nationalists when they're talking. They have absolutely no logic behind it. But the second you start challenging them and pushing back, here comes out the big stick to beat you with. And the big stick is the state, it's the institutions, it's the corporations. On the left side of the spectrum, the canceling is going on from a pool of angry people on the internet who point something out and then make somebody unpopular. So, corporations might not want to have something to do with them because there's some bad connotation attached to them now. But if you look on the Trump administration, they're canceling what you can you on college campuses. They're banning you from saying certain things. They don't want you to demonstrate. And then they run and they cry victim. They're always the victim. Oh, I'm the victim of the persecution. It's actually me that is the one that is being bullied and needs a safe space. And it feels as if, I'm being discriminated against. So what they've done essentially is they've put like a political ideology behind this identity politics, political ideology behind their right-wing power right now. And they've piggybacked, they've basically learned everything that was used by some people on the left. And what they've done, instead of it being a popular thing, which is, from the ground up in terms of coming for people and trying to, let's say, recreate, language or, for instance, criticize the way that we approach certain issues and the way that we link different political issues. Now the right have done that. They've weaponized it. They've done it with power. And they're basically saying the exact same thing that they're accusing their opposition of doing. They're the snowflakes. They're the ones crying anti-Semitism over everything. They're the one now, the anti-white, they want to cancel Christmas and they want to do...
The war on Christmas. The war on Christmas has been going on since I was a kid. In fact, that was one of my buddies' gamer tags, growing up, and it was really incendiary. But basically, we're seeing a modeling or kind of like a reverberation or reflection on what's going on around Israel with the IDF forces. They're taking casualties. Fighting against the Hamas terrorists that are trying to conduct a genocide. The Homeland Security keeps posting this stuff. It's insane. Calls for violence against our ICE government law enforcement agents must end now. This despicable rhetoric has contributed to a 700% increase in assaults against them. Sanctuary politicians continue to fuel this vile rhetoric while our brave ICE agents are working to arrest the most dangerous criminals imaginable. It's shameful. And again,
I just finished an article because I did a segment, for Mint on these vulnerable populations, like street vendors that are being targeted. Data shows it actively contradicts what DHS is saying. They're not, I think, let me remember, out of 722 migrants detained in the first 10 days of June, 80% were not convicted of any crime or violent. And so if the trend continues, it actively contradicts what they're saying. When we look at the data, they're not even targeting criminals. This is what we're saying. It actually showed that they're targeting working class males. And so this is really interesting. Also, these DHS and ICE agents, they come with guns and batons, and they come in unmarked cars, and they come in teams of 3, and they come in the night and they catch you on your way home. And it's nobody's attacking ICE agents. And I love the double standard of these ICE agents coming in masked up. Kristi Noem is these ICE agents are being doxxed. They just, want to provide for their families. Guess who else wants to provide for their families? You know what I mean? Like, it's just this horrendous double standard.
Right. Well, we see it all the time. Do you say they're like focusing on working class men?
Absolutely. And we read so many testimonies of United States Marines that were kind of promised this safety for their undocumented family members. But then you have like a United States Marine, his wife Paula was detained and seized while she was at her immigration appointment. We have another United States Marine. His father was taken while he was cutting shrubs at a Waffle House because he does landscaping. We had another one where he was a street vendor and like, this is just his job. And they just took him. He wasn't a criminal. And I've spoken to so many immigrants, undocumented as well, who tell us, I spoke to a girl and it was her graduation day. This was my first week in LA. She graduated from high school and immediately went to a protest, like in her cap and gown. And she says, what they don't understand is they love labeling us as criminals, but they don't understand that immigrants come to the United States and they fear getting in trouble. They do they do everything to, obey the law. We probably obey the law more than anybody because we don't want to get detained. We don't want to get in trouble. We truly are coming here for better opportunities. And then again, their very existence is being criminalized. And so, how do you combat that?
Yeah, I was on this like Breaking Points like subsidiary interview yesterday, and I got asked like, do you see any like correlation between like your experiences in Afghanistan with the U.S. military and these like deportation operations? And I was like, what? Actually, yeah, because under Obama during the Afghan surge, when I was in Joint Special Operations Command, we had quotas. It was kind of like unspoken, there wasn't a memo going down, but it was like, hey guys, like, okay, so we're supposed to hit these high value targets, Taliban, Haqqani, Al-Qaeda, proto-Islamic State, but there's no like actual actionable intelligence for, where like a sub-lieutenant or a lieutenant or a commander will be. So they're just like, well, if you don't have any known targets, go for like likely and suspected.
Yes.
So a lot of the like direct action night raid kill capture operations we did were what we call dry holes. It was just a random house, wrong people, bad intelligence because it was like no intelligence, and just ended up terrorizing an entire population.
Yeah, that's what they're doing in LA. It's like, just take anybody brown. And I mean that. That's what they're telling me. That's what we've read on the news. Like, it's like, just take anybody brown, anybody you think, and we'll just detain them like Mahmoud Khalil.
No, yeah, we got to have these numbers.
Do now, think later. And it's like, this is gross. But again, these surveillance mechanisms and techniques allow for, these vague practices so that we can just generalize, like just bag all the brown people, put them away. We'll decide who's illegal later, undocumented. And so it's really gross. And it's really scary because citizens, Mexican citizens that are American citizens and have their citizenship, as well as just like Hispanics that, are brown, have told me they're like, I'm really afraid of going out. Like, they're just taking anybody. Like, also what I've read is that DHS has been instructed to just take anybody in the vicinity. Like, if I'm seizing an undocumented immigrant, that's the father. If the mother and the grandmother are there, I'm taking them too, even if they're documented. And so it's just really predatory. None of it makes any sense. You're right. There's no intel behind these practices at all.
And so it's kind of crazy too, because we had like the best intelligence architecture on the planet at the time, and we just didn't have anything either. And so like, yeah, they have all these Israeli like high tech stuff from like Palantir. That doesn't mean you actually have anything actionable, at least in my own experience. And Robert, having lived and reported from the occupied Palestinian territories, like how reminiscent and like, do you see this going to a level that we're seeing over there? Not with the home demolitions, but with detentions and stuff like that.
Well, of course, it's been going on for a very long time in the occupied territories. So, and then before that, they were doing it in what's now called Israel proper, because in 1960, up until 1966, those Palestinians who are now citizens of Israel were under military law as well. So they were being detained in the same way. But it's the same sort of strategy, except like here in this case, we're talking about all of the Palestinians who are detained. The vast preponderance of them have done absolutely nothing. There is no legal recourse at all in any way. It's a 99.9% or 7% conviction rate in a kangaroo court. And now today, what it's expanded into, because obviously it's getting worse and worse in the United States, And my knowledge on how bad it is in the United States is not as extensive, perhaps, as both of yours. But in terms of what's happening, what's been happening in the occupied West Bank, I saw them seize children out of their homes in the night. That's just something that they've been doing. You know, a 12-year-old child can be snatched from their home in the middle of the night in a raid. They provide absolutely no justifications. Throwing stones is enough. It's sufficient. And then they can hold them in administrative detention for as long as they choose to. I had one friend of mine I was staying with over there. Two of his sons were taken, both when they were 17 years old, and one of them when I was there. For throwing stones, apparently. And they put a whole bunch of other stupid charges on them. But for the first 6 months of their detention, there was nothing. They just kept extending these administrative detention orders, which is held without a charge. Now it's gotten to a situation which is much more severe than just going and rounding people up and picking people at random, who are the kids who are most likely in the village to be, going to the wall and cutting the fence or something like that. Now it's to the point with Gaza where it's outside of the realm of the Israeli military court system. They've set up these prisons where there are no convictions at all. They're staffed by members of the Israeli military, like Satiman detention facility. They round up thousands of people. There's no proper documentation for them. So they don't actually have any documents that we know about to say that, okay, we have, this person, this age in this facility here at this time. They round people up at will. People are disappeared. We never hear from them again. Many people have just been disappeared and we don't know where they are. People don't know whether they're under the rubble or whether they're in these detention facilities. And then occasionally somebody will be released from a detention facility like Satiman, where they are committing things like gang rape and mass sexual abuse. And it's the soldiers doing this, not prison guards, because, there are no people that are convicted of anything. You'll remember when this right to gang rape protests happened.
Yes.
When that all went on. And then there was this member of the Israeli Knesset who was debating, we should be able to do whatever we want with the Nukhba terrorists. The Nukhba are the special forces of Hamas, of the Qassam. But there's no way that they could have known that, because if somebody was actually guilty of something, they would not be in Satiman. Because the second that person, you have evidence against that person, you transfer them out of Satiman detention facility. And while they're there, they transfer them to facilities where they're interrogated by the Shin Bet. So they don't actually have any intelligence on who these people are. They just round them up, put them in this detention camp, and then torture them at will. And sometimes maybe they'll get a confession out of somebody. Maybe it's genuine, maybe it's not. And then they'll, spirit them away to another facility where they'll actually bring charges against them. But the way that it's been conducted by the Israelis is reminiscent and even worse than what the British did during the British Mandate period in occupied Palestine, when the Palestinians revolted during the Arab Revolt, as it's known, between 36 and 39. The British established these prison facilities, which were very similar. And they did very similar things with the sexual abuse. I don't want to go into detail with things, but, let's leave it at sexual abuse and rape that the British committed against Palestinians, thousands of them back then. The Israelis have basically replicated this, but it's now on steroids, what they're doing. So, there is that theory of the slippery slope here, that if the United States keeps doing this, and it's collaborating and law enforcement agencies and private security firms and government is so interwoven with those on the Israeli side, that how bad will this get? Will it just be a few cases of the horror stories, or will this be a more widespread overarching system which will just disappear people, black bag them en masse all the time? without any legal recourse for those who were the victims of it whatsoever.
I mean, it does remind me of the early days of the global war on terror with like the CIA's extraordinary rendition program, where people were just disappeared in the night. Well, in terms of like, it always like starts with colonial violence and then boomerangs back, right? The thing about the U.S. military, well, I'll never apologize for, U.S. military imperialist intervention. It's kind of stark that it wasn't as institutionalized. There were massive scandals like the Haditha massacre and Abu Ghraib. And, there was that one story with a 14-year-old girl, and I think it was the 82nd Airborne. But it wasn't institutionalized. But now it's kind of like disturbing to see it's like a lot of this stuff is institutionalized within these ICE detention facilities. Like if you look at the border reporting that like NPR and Latino USA has done over the past like decades, the amount of like sexual abuse that goes on, or like allegedly, but come on, that goes on in these detention facilities where there's no legal oversight, where they're not even letting congressional members in who, congressmen have a legal right and some would say obligation to do spot inspections of these facilities. They're not even letting them in anymore. They're arresting them. So I'm definitely kind of concerned about how like all of this is influencing each other. And of course, all these evangelicals who create in the Heritage Foundation, who are behind this mass deportation push, look at envy with what the Israelis do. Absolutely. And like, Jalyssa, like, do you have a sense about like how many of these police officers or ICE officers like idealize or respect or look up to the Israeli Defense Forces?
It's like to be honest, what I gathered is they're just dead inside. They're told to do something and they're just doing it. And a lot of times they won't even speak to us. You try to ask them questions and they won't even look at you. They won't even tell you who they are. They won't tell you their name or their when I first went, they're telling you their badge number. Now they won't even tell you their badge number. And so the anonymity is, if I said that right, is kind of protected amongst these forces, law enforcement, LAPD, USMC, the California National Guard. And that's all I really can say. They don't talk to us. I haven't seen anybody. I've seen a bunch of like spray painted, the pigs are trained by the IDF. But for the most part, they won't talk to you. But all we can say is that the tactics are replicated. And so they must see this as an efficient way to accomplish what they set out to do. And for that, I think that speaks for itself.
That's true. The performative effect, whether or not they love the IDF or not, is the same. And I would just like to make one point before we wrap up here. The fusion, the conflation of military and paramilitary forces is intentional. It's all part of a normalization process. So yes, while the Marine Corps and the National Guard aren't really doing anything beyond providing logistical support to, Alligator Alcatraz or whatever, it's all part of a PR normalization campaign. Because while Trump may be not the smartest guy, he has amazing political instincts, which he seems to be losing rapidly. The people backing him at the Heritage Foundation are actually incredibly intelligent. They know exactly what they're doing. And to that end, I just wanted to put all of this and round all of this out with a quote from one of the border chiefs of the El Central unit from 2 days ago. Greg Bovino is his name.
Federal government is not leaving LA. I don't work for Karen Bass. The federal government doesn't work for Karen Bass. We're going to be here till that mission's accomplished, as I said, and better get used to us now, because this is going to be normal very soon.
Yeah, but it's not working. So cool.
LA's resisting hard as hell. They are resisting, and they're going to keep resisting. To be honest, I don't see like an end in sight for this at all.
Right. And we're stuck now with an intractable political problem, which is the mass deportations that are completely operationally impossible. And then Israel's stuck with the Gaza problem and getting rid of that, which seems to be, I don't know, politically and logistically impossible as well.
The mass deportation and concentration camps, that the idea that Israel has for the Palestinians to move out 1.8 million people, the idea that we can arrest and detain 3,000 immigrants a day, it's just all like really unattainable. It's not realistic. And in the end, resistance exists, whether it's domestic in the United States or, if it's in the Middle East, this exists. And so they'll always have that as an obstacle to these larger geopolitical goals they seek to achieve.
Yeah, and I just wanted to point out here in closing that we no longer have the power projection that we had in the 90s. We no longer have the strength to, impose sanctions and do military interventions. And, we want to gin up consent for a war against Iran, but we couldn't even do that at the height of our powers in the post-Desert Storm era. That was completely strategically unfeasible. Iran's a death trap. It's a garrison state. And then we have no one else on the target deck right now for intervention. We can't gin up enough support for the invasion of the Yemeni mountains to take it to Ansarallah. So the next forever war, because the U.S. demands a forever war, is going to be here. And just like our forever wars, they don't work, but they do make a very select few a lot of money. So thanks for your time. We just wanted to, y'all, we just wanted to highlight and have a kind of like an open discussion about these developments and kind of have an evergreen episode, because these tactics aren't going to change. These stated goals aren't going to change. And I think in the end, even though the violence may increase horrifically in the short term, both overseas and domestically, it doesn't seem like it's going to work. It's a bold move, Cotton, but I don't think it's going to work out. So thanks, y'all, for watching. This has been with Robert Inlakesh at MintPress News, and Jalyssa Dugrot, who's been a MintPress News correspondent covering the ICE raids. Thank y'all so much. Like, share, and subscribe. And again, we are on audio platforms, so check us out there if you don't want to have to look at our faces. And guess what, guys? We will see you next Monday. And thanks y'all so much for coming on.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right. See you next week. Try to enjoy your weekend. And, hobbies are a good thing, here in the end times.